My name is Grace, and I'm 29. The band had just switched from the swelling strings of our first dance to something you could breathe in. Glasses chimed. Someone's aunt laughed too loudly. Fairy lights pressed meek halos onto everyone's hair. I could taste the frosting from the cake test on my thumb. The way sugar hangs on the air when a moment tries to convince you it's perfect. And then my mother smiled. Or she would have if she were actually there. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's standing in this corner of the internet with me. I slipped away from the reception, the polite applause fading behind me as I walked toward the bridal suite. It was quiet inside, cool and sterile, a stark contrast to the humidity of the Savannah evening. I sat on the edge of the velvet settee and picked up my phone. I wasn't checking for congratulations. I was checking for an explanation. There was a notification from Chloe. I opened it, the screen filled with bright, saturated blue, the Aegean Sea. There they were, my parents, Stephanie and Robert, and my sister Chloe, standing on the teak deck of a private yacht. They were tanned, glowing, holding champagne flutes against a backdrop of whitewashed buildings and turquoise water. Mykonos. The caption read, "Making waves with the billionaires. Sometimes business comes first. #priorities. #empire building." I stared at the screen. The silence in the room seemed to deepen, pressing against my ears like water. They hadn't missed my wedding because of a canceled flight. They hadn't missed it because of a family emergency. They had missed it because they found a better party. They assumed I wouldn't see it until tomorrow. They assumed I would be too wrapped up in my little garden party, as my mother called it, to check social media. They assumed I would just forgive them like I always did because I was Grace. I was the reliable one. I was the silent partner who understood that business comes first. But this time I didn't feel the familiar ache of disappointment. I didn't feel the urge to cry or to call them and beg for an explanation. I felt something else entirely. Cold, clinical, precise. I sat down at the vanity table, pushing aside the makeup brushes and the hairspray. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed, illuminating my face in the dim room. I logged into the admin portal for Prestige Events. My fingers moved over the keyboard with practiced speed. I wasn't shaking. My breathing was steady. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a transaction. I navigated to the user management tab. Stephanie, Robert, Chloe. Their names were listed as super administrators, giving them full access to everything, the bank accounts, the client lists, the vendor contracts. They had the keys to the kingdom, but they had never bothered to learn how the castle was built. I clicked edit. Then revoke access. I did it for my mother first, then my father, then Chloe. One by one, their digital fingerprints were erased from the system. Next, I went to the financial dashboard. I pulled up the corporate credit cards, the black cards they loved to flash at dinners, the ones they were currently using to buy rounds of drinks in Greece. I selected the card ending in 4521. Status active. Recent transactions: Helios Yacht Charters, $80,000. Mykonos Beach Club, $5,000. $80,000. They had charged the yacht to the company, to my hard work. I didn't hesitate. I clicked freeze. I repeated the process for every card linked to their names. The travel accounts, the expense stipends, the gas cards. Within 5 minutes, it was done. The kill switch was engaged. They were thousands of miles away, surrounded by luxury, believing they were the masters of the universe. But in reality, they were just actors on a stage, and I had just cut the power to the theater. I closed the laptop. The screen went black. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was still wearing my wedding dress, but the woman looking back at me wasn't a bride anymore. She was a CEO conducting a hostile takeover. I stood up, smoothed the silk of my skirt, and walked back out to the reception. The music was playing. Jason was waiting for me on the dance floor. I smiled, and for the first time all day it reached my eyes. To understand why I didn't hesitate, you have to understand what Prestige Events actually is. On paper, it's a family business. My parents, Stephanie and Robert, are the founders. They are the faces you see in the society pages, the ones shaking hands with mayors and celebrities, the ones accepting awards for excellence in hospitality. But the reality is a $15 million empire built on a foundation of smoke and mirrors, and I am the smoke. I started working for them when I was 19. I dropped out of college to help out for a semester when their operations manager quit. That semester turned into a decade. While my friends were graduating and traveling and starting careers, I was in the back office teaching myself accounting, logistics, and contract law. My parents didn't run the business. They performed it. They were brilliant at the performance. They could charm a check out of a stone. But once the contract was signed, they vanished. They didn't know how to execute a 600-person gala. They didn't know how to negotiate with unions or manage supply chains. They didn't even know the password to the bank account. I did. I was the ghost in the machine. I was the one who stayed late to fix the budgets they blew. I was the one who smoothed over the vendor relationships they damaged with their arrogance. I was the one who made sure the light stayed on while they took credit for the shine. And then there was Chloe, my sister, the creative director. A title that meant she got a salary of 6 figures to post selfies and critique the font choices on invitations she didn't design. Last year, Chloe decided she wanted to launch her own lifestyle brand. She needed capital. My parents told her to ask the bank. The bank laughed at her credit score. So they came to me. "Grace, honey," my mother had said, her hand on my arm, her voice dripping with that weaponized sweetness. "You have such good credit. You've been so responsible. Just sign as a guarantor. We'll cover the payments. It's just a formality." I signed. A $350,000 line of credit, personally guaranteed by me. Why? Why did I do it? Why did I stay for 10 years building their fortune while they paid me a salary that barely covered my rent? Why did I let them treat me like a glorified assistant? It's hard to explain if you haven't lived it. It's like a prison without bars. You don't stay because you're locked in. You stay because they've convinced you that the key doesn't work for you. I call it the invisible chain of the survivor. You grow up believing that your value is entirely transactional. You believe that love is something you have to earn, rent that is due every single day. You think, if I just work harder, if I just fix this one last crisis, if I just make them successful enough, then they'll see me, then they'll appreciate me, then I'll be safe. You become the Atlas of the family holding up their sky, terrified that if you shrug, everything will collapse and it will be your fault. You convince yourself that your endurance is a virtue, that your ability to suffer in silence is what makes you good. But it's not virtue. It's just exploitation dressed up as duty. I sat there at my wedding reception watching Jason laugh with his friends, and I realized the truth. I wasn't holding up the sky. I was just holding up a ceiling that was keeping me small. They hadn't come to my wedding because they didn't think they needed to. In their minds, I wasn't a person to be celebrated. I was an appliance. You don't go to your toaster's birthday party. You just expect it to work when you push the button. But the appliance was broken now, and the warranty had just expired. It started on Wednesday, midweek. I was in the garden with Jason, kneeling in the dirt planting hydrangeas. It was one of the few days I had taken off a mini honeymoon since we couldn't afford a real one yet. My phone was on the grass beside me, face up. It lit up. A text from Stephanie. "Grace, the card was declined. Call the bank immediately. We're at Namos and it's embarrassing." I didn't pick it up. I just watched the screen go dark. 5 minutes later, it lit up again. "Robert, this time. Pick up the phone. The travel agent says the return flights have been canceled. Fix this." Then Chloe. "My card isn't working either. I'm trying to buy a bag and I look like an idiot. Transfer funds to my personal account now." I continued digging. The soil was cool and rich against my fingers. Jason looked over at the buzzing phone. "Are you going to answer that?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "No," I said calmly. "I don't think I will." By evening, the texts had turned into voicemails. I listened to them later, sitting on the porch with a glass of wine. They weren't worried. They weren't apologetic. They were furious. They sounded like confused children who had walked into a room and found the lights didn't work. "You are embarrassing us in front of the client," my mother shrieked in one message. "Mr. Kalos is expecting us to host dinner tonight and the card is dead. Do you have any idea what you are doing? You are sabotaging this family." Sabotage. That was a funny word for stopping the theft. I thought about the concept of the empty wallet. It's a specific kind of delusion. My family had spent so many years spending money I earned that they had forgotten it wasn't theirs. They believed their power was inherent, a natural trait like their eye color. They thought they walked into rooms and commanded respect because they were Stephanie and Robert. But they didn't. They commanded respect because they had a platinum card that cleared. They commanded respect because they could buy the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu. They confused spending power with personal worth. Now, standing on a dock in Greece with a declined card, they were discovering the difference. Without the money, they were just 3 loud Americans in expensive clothes demanding things they couldn't pay for. They were actors who had forgotten they were on a stage, and now the props were being repossessed mid-scene. Chloe posted a story on Instagram later that night. A black screen with white text. "Some people are so toxic they will try to ruin your happiness just because they're miserable." #jealousy. #family drama. I laughed. A genuine belly-deep laugh. They still thought this was a tantrum. They thought I was just mad about the wedding and was pulling a petty stunt. They thought I would turn the cards back on in an hour once I'd made my point. They had no idea. I wasn't trying to teach them a lesson. I was evicting them. I sent one text back to the group chat before I went to bed. The cards are canceled. The accounts are frozen. Figure it out. Then I blocked their numbers for the night. I slept better than I had in 10 years. Thursday morning, I didn't go to the office. I went to the glass-walled building downtown where my corporate attorney Marcus had his practice. Marcus had been the company's lawyer for 5 years, but he and I had always had an understanding. He knew who did the work. He knew who signed the checks. When I walked into his conference room, he didn't look surprised. He looked ready. "They're calling the office every 10 minutes, he said, sliding a file across the mahogany table. "Your father is threatening to sue the bank. Your mother is screaming about elder abuse. It's a circus." "Let them scream," I said, sitting down. "I want to formalize the dissolution." We spent the next 4 hours building the firewall. This wasn't just about freezing credit cards anymore. This was about survival. First, the Black Book, the proprietary database of our top-tier clients, the billionaires, the celebrities, the political foundations. It was the single most valuable asset the company owned. It lived on a secure server that only I had the admin keys for. "Lock it," I said. "Change the encryption. Revoke all user permissions except mine. If they want a client's phone number, they can look it up in the phone book." Marcus typed the command. Done. Next, the bank. I signed the paperwork to remove my personal guarantee from the company's lines of credit. This was the nuclear option. Without my guarantee based on my personal assets and credit score, the bank would immediately call in the loans. The company would be insolvent within 30 days. "Are you sure about this?" Grace Marcus asked, his pen hovering over the document. "This will kill the business. There's no coming back from this." "The business is already dead," I said. "It's just a zombie walking around on my credit card. I'm just putting it in the ground." I signed the paper. The scratch of the pen sounded loud in the quiet room. Then, the dissolution notice. A formal letter stating that due to gross financial misconduct and neglect of fiduciary duty, I was resigning as COO and withdrawing my operational support effective immediately. "How do you want to deliver this?" Marcus asked. "Courier," I said. "To the office. And email a copy to their phones. I want them to read it while they're sitting in the airport waiting for their economy flight home." I stood up and reached into my bag. I pulled out a set of heavy, encrypted USB drives and a ring of physical keys to the office, the safe, the storage units. I placed them on the table. "I'm done, Marcus. I'm not a daughter anymore. I'm a plaintiff." He nodded, sweeping the keys into a drawer. "I'll handle the communications. You go home. Don't answer the door." I walked out of the building into the bright midday sun. I felt lighter. The invisible chain was gone. I had broken it myself. Chapter 6. The Trojan Horse Expense. I was in the kitchen making tea when Marcus called again on Friday afternoon. His voice was different this time, tighter, less like a lawyer discussing strategy, and more like a man delivering a death notification. "Grace, are you sitting down?" "I'm standing." "What is it? Did they file an injunction?" "No. We were running the forensic audit you requested. The preliminary numbers on the yacht charter came back." I gripped the counter. "I know about the charter. $80,000. I saw the charge." "You saw the charge description," Marcus corrected. "But we traced the funding source. That $80,000 didn't come from the general operating account." "Where did it come from?" "It came from the Emergency Reserve Fund, the one labeled Tax Liability and Grace. That account is legally linked to your personal Social Security number. It was set up that way years ago to secure the initial bonding." The room spun slightly. "Wait, are you saying—" "I'm saying they didn't just spend company money. They drained the tax account. If that money isn't replaced by the end of the quarter, the IRS comes after you, not the corporation. You are personally liable for that debt." I dropped the spoon. It clattered loudly into the sink. They knew. They had to know. I had explained the structure of that account to my father a dozen times. "This is the do not touch money," I had said. "This is the money that keeps us out of jail." They hadn't just been reckless, they had been predatory. They had looked at that account, seen my name on it, and thought, "She'll fix it. She always fixes it. Or maybe she won't notice until it's too late." It was a Trojan horse. They had skipped my wedding to party, and they had billed me for the privilege rigging a financial bomb to my identity in the process. "It's fraud," Marcus said, his voice hard. Criminal fraud, embezzlement, piercing the corporate veil. We have them, Grace. This isn't a civil dispute anymore. We can go to the district attorney. I closed my eyes. I pictured my parents laughing on that yacht. I pictured Chloe posing with her new bag. They were smiling because they thought they were clever. They thought they had outsmarted the system. They didn't realize they had just handed me the gun. Do it, I whispered. Grace. Draft the affidavit, I said, my voice steadying into steel. Prepare the criminal referral, but don't file it yet. I want to show it to them first. You want to leverage it? No, I said. I want to watch them realize that the game is over. They came back on Sunday. I knew because the security system at the office alerted me that someone was trying to use a deactivated passcode at the main gate. I drove over. Jason wanted to come, but I told him no. This was something I had to do alone. When I pulled up to the office, a sleek modern building on the outskirts of the city, they were standing by the gate. Their luggage was piled on the sidewalk. They looked exhausted, disheveled, and furious. The Mykonos glow had faded into sunburn and panic. My father Robert saw my car and marched over, slapping his hand on the hood before I even parked. "Open this gate!" he shouted, his face mottled with rage. "Have you lost your mind? You locked us out of our own building." I got out of the car. I didn't shout. I stood calm, holding a single manila envelope. "It's not your building anymore," I said. "The bank called the loan this morning. They're seizing the assets." "You did this!" Stephanie screamed, stepping forward. She looked less like a socialite and more like a cornered animal. "You spiteful, ungrateful little. We gave you everything. We let you run this company." "You let me carry this company," I corrected, "and now I put it down." "We're going to sue you," Chloe spat, looking up from her phone. "I've already posted about how you stole our business. My followers are going to destroy you." "Your followers?" I asked. "The ones you bought with the marketing budget. That account is gone, Chloe." "I deleted it this morning." Her mouth fell open. "And as for suing me," I said, turning back to Robert, "I wouldn't recommend it." I held up the envelope. "This is the forensic audit of the tax account," I said. $80,000. Stolen from a federally secured fund linked to my social security number. That's embezzlement, Dad. That's 10 years in federal prison. Robert froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. He knew. He absolutely knew. "Grace," he stammered, his voice dropping an octave. "Grace, wait. That was a misunderstanding. We intended to pay it back." "With what money?" I asked. "The money you don't have, the credit you don't have." I took a step forward, and for the first time in my life I saw them shrink. They were terrified. The illusion was gone. The empty wallet was exposed. "Here is the deal," I said, my voice cutting through the humid air. "Inside this envelope is a buyout agreement. You sell me your shares for $1 each. You resign from the board. You sign a non-disclosure agreement admitting to the financial irregularities. If you sign, I assume the tax liability myself and I don't file the criminal referral." $1, Stephanie gasped. "The company is worth $15 million. "The company is worth nothing without me," I said. "It's a shell. And right now, it's a shell filled with debt and potential jail time. Sign the papers or I drive straight to the DA's office." I tossed the envelope onto the top of their luggage. "You have 5 minutes." I leaned against my car and waited. They huddled together, whispering, arguing, crying. It was pathetic. They weren't titans of industry. They were just grifters who had run out of road. 4 minutes later, Robert walked over. He didn't look at me. He signed the paper against the hood of the car. Stephanie signed. Chloe signed. He handed the envelope back to me. His hand was shaking. "You're heartless," he whispered. "I learned from the best," I said. I took the envelope, got back in my car, and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I left them standing on the sidewalk outside the gate, exactly where they belonged. The next few months were a blur of paperwork and dismantling. I didn't keep prestige events. I sold the client list to a competitor for a fraction of its value just to clear the tax debt and pay off the vendors. I burned the brand to the ground. It felt like a cleansing fire. My parents moved to a small condo in Florida. They told everyone they had retired early. Chloe got a job as a receptionist at a gym. Her influencer career never recovered. We didn't speak. I thought I would feel empty. I thought I would feel lost without the weight of the sky on my shoulders. But I felt quiet. Then came the letter. It was from a law firm in Boston. The estate of Arthur Sterling, my grandfather. He had died 5 years ago, and I thought his estate had been settled. I opened it at the kitchen table with Jason. Dear Grace, the letter began, if you are reading this, it means you have finally severed ties with the family business. Your grandfather included a specific contingency clause in his trust. He knew your parents. He knew they would use you until there was nothing left. He wanted to ensure that when you finally walked away, you wouldn't walk away empty-handed. The trust had been sitting there frozen, waiting for the moment I was no longer employed by Prestige Events. $4.2 million. And the deed to his old estate in the countryside, a place I had loved as a child but hadn't seen in years. I cried then, not out of sadness but out of relief. Someone had seen me. Someone had known. I didn't keep the money just for myself. I remembered the justice of the sower. True victory isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something they can't touch. I used the capital to launch the Ghostwriter Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting invisible creatives, the planners, the assistants, the ghostwriters, the people behind the scenes who do the work while others take the credit. We provide grants, legal support, and business training to help them break free and build their own empires. I'm standing in the garden of my grandfather's estate now. It's early morning. The sun is coming up over the trees, casting long golden shadows across the grass. I'm planting a new oak tree near the gate. Jason brings me a cup of coffee. He kisses my forehead. It's going to be a good day, he says. Yes, I answer. It is. I look at the dirt on my hands. I dug the hole myself. I planted the seed myself. And for the first time in my life, the harvest will be mine. Revenge is noise. It's loud and exhausting. Peace is silent. And silence is the most expensive luxury of all. If you've ever been the one holding up the sky for people who wouldn't even hold an umbrella for you, share this story. Let's remind the world that the strongest pillars are the ones who know when to walk away.